Hi everyone, I'm Sally Wilson and I have with me as my guest the extraordinary TRTP mentor and practitioner, David Cluff. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Sally.
So, David, you have had already quite a long career in counselling before you came across TRTP and some other disciplines as well as supervising. Why did you train in TRTP?
Probably motivated primarily by a specific client who just doesn't know probably how much influential she's been in my professional personal life. The experience was I was doing, through regular modalities, trauma counselling with this person, doing wonderfully well. Had a great session, and that evening a portal of memory opened up for this person out of the containment and safety of therapy. And she was flooded and overwhelmed and become so distressed, hospitalized that night. And when I found out the next day, I found myself asking, or really telling myself, this is just stupid.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense, because it contrasted the experience of therapy, me thinking I was doing well. I wasn't personalizing or blaming myself. I just thought broadly, this isn't good enough. So I started Googling, researching therapies that could prevent, mitigate, re-traumatizing. And the Richards trauma process kept coming up in search. Ironically, though, I'd previously come across it, and perhaps in the background, with the support of colleagues in the same mindset, made fun of it because it proposed to resolve the symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, and depression in 3 sessions, which in the world I was trained in and practiced in was laughable and almost ethically questionable. So I was skeptical, but I was hell-bent on finding a modality that could prevent re-traumatizing, because I'd reached that point of, this is just not good enough.
Yeah.
So that's how I came about it. I made an inquiry with the Richards Trauma Process organisation. I got a phone call from Judith, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. And so what were your expectations, sort of therapeutically, what were your expectations with your clients back? I know that's very hard to answer because every client is different, but just in a general sense.
I don't think I knew back then, other than what people had told me about or what I'd read about, what true transformation was. So the bar was, by today's standard, quite low, I would say, but still, there's nothing wrong with the bar that I set. More agency in people's lives, more choices, more ability to function well in relationship, not being so reactive, not being so distressed by the symptoms of anxiety or depression, social connection, just those things, mindfulness, personal practices, self-awareness, they were really the hallmark of the work that I did, and I did it really well.
Yeah.
So on those measures, I saw those incremental improvements. I think I developed well that relationship rapport with the clients. They kept coming back, so something was working. However, that's where the benchmark was.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure that I understood what empowerment was back then. It would only be in very few circumstances that I witnessed empowerment in terms of outcomes. I think in reflection, that more often than not, especially with long-term clients, it was more dependency.
Yeah. And how does that contrast with your work, including TRTP now?
TRTP has brought in a whole bunch of professional experiences and personal experiences. I think the biggest contrast is the experienced understanding of choice. Because I didn't realize, even back as a practitioner, just how much I was living reactively, that life was choosing me. And even in the sense of professional outcomes, it seemed like, that I was just dealing with what it is I had to deal with. I didn't feel or even know that that faculty was possible, or, I wasn't engaging. I couldn't see what I couldn't see. So TRTP taught me the value of choice as the antithesis of victimhood.
Yeah.
Because it became the imperative that informed me, informed the energy I bring into therapy. And I guess we use the word entrainment, the ability to impart the empowerment of choice onto the clients that I work with. So I think that was the big gain initially, along with the deep comprehension of understanding just how influential the unseen parts of us, the unconscious or the involuntary parts of us, influence our life outcomes.
Yeah. And so in your practice now, how, percentage-wise, how much of your practice now would be focused around TRTP?
It's a really big question to ask, because in the purest sense of practicing TRTP, it would have to be around 50% or more.
Yeah.
But to differentiate then, or try and pull apart the influence TRTP has had on the other parts of my practice, would seem a little bit silly, because it's influenced every part of the way I practice, no matter what type of therapy I'm doing.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm getting goosebumps. This is just wonderful, David. Thank you for all this information. And you have already shared, some of the personal shifts that happened for you, because all trainee practitioners go through the process themselves. Are you happy to share just a couple more things that have shifted for you?
Sure. Well, when I come back to the place of choice, the overarching choice that's most significant to me is I get to choose the life I desire. And that choice has brought empowerment into all areas of my life, which brings a different energy to me as a partner, me as a father, grandfather, a friend, a family member. It doesn't matter what it is. It's brought an incredible shift in that energy. Life still happens, of course. It has a way of doing things. But even if I reflect back on a sad point, not long this time last year, my mother passing away, TRTP provided me a way to properly say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I know I can think back at the way I said goodbye and just feel the honoring in that, and not carry the pangs, but really the connection of that moment. So just in small things, well, that's not a small thing, but in those sort of life experiences, I'm equipped, I'm empowered to make choices that look after me. And if I'm looking after me, then those around me can rest and not have to worry about looking after me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, because a lot of the therapy that's out there, that's offered, is very intellect based. How did you find it was a big paradigm shift? Did you find it was a big shift to actually move away, just allow for something entirely different?
Absolutely. In fact, I had some secondary gains I had to deal with by moving away, at least as I perceived it. I don't know that feeling back then was entirely real, but from an experience point of view, it felt real. I felt back then I was making some shifts around my comprehension of being human and shifts around my comprehension of the residual effect of attachment to stress, early life, and trauma and the way it impacts the body. And I'd come from another system, probably well known in some corners as the contemplative tradition. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And there's aspects of that I still practice today. However, the system of belonging in that was the thing I felt I was threatening the most. And the courage of moving towards TRTP, which seemed to turn it a little bit upside down, because this is not about attuning and tending to people in their pain. TRTP is about shifting it, right?
Yeah.
Moving from empathy to compassion, moving people away from their places of entrapment, being more directive, being more empowered as a practitioner. At some level, in my own mind, said to the belonging group that I was in from that contemplative space that there's more than this. And I felt the insecurity of that at the time. And at least, again, I'll just say within myself, it felt like I was threatening that. And when I talked about secondary gain, what did I stand to risk the most by moving to a modality like TRTP? It seemed like those friendships, those connections were the things that I felt I was risking the most. But ironically, the flip of that has happened. It's not.
I bet it has.
Yeah.
David, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for your insights and your carefully considered answers to those questions.
My pleasure.
And for your generosity and your openness as well.
My pleasure, Sally.
And thank you, listeners and watchers, for being a part of this conversation. Thanks, everyone. Bye.